All right, our final presentation of the symposium, the plenary session. It's called Storytelling is Activism, How Crafting Personal Narratives Brings About Change. Our presenters this afternoon are going to be Rachel Lake and Nathan Thompson. Let's give them a big hand.
Hello. There's been lots of really great presentations. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces. And we always look forward to this event every year. So thanks for staying till the end for our presentation. So I'm Rachel Lake. I'm the event manager for Grow the Flow. I table at events like this. I try to organize community events for our Salt Lake volunteers to get more involved with the Great Salt Lake. And I graduated from the University of Utah, so that's my journey is how I came here today. But I'll give it away to Nathan, who's my colleague, and he came all the way down from Logan for this. And so we're really excited to get going.
So yeah, I'm Nathan. We're kind of in the operations field we're both with Grow the Flow. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Grow the Flow is a nonpartisan, nonprofit environmental advocacy organization. So our real big mission is getting water to Great Salt Lake. And as we've had several presentations on throughout the course of this conference, the symposium, Great Salt Lake is obviously in trouble. And so what we really wanted to focus on today is how we can use our voices individually and collectively to really start sparking that change and kind of building that fire.
Okay, so if you stuck around for Kevin Perry's talk yesterday, he talked a lot about how the dust is reaching our communities in Great Salt Lake. So we're just going to go real quick through these slides because we don't want to be preaching to the choir, but I think it's important to know that we chose to talk about dust and center storytelling about the Great Salt Lake around dust because it's like the number one thing that communities are worried about. Like if you're a mom and you have a daughter, then you are worried she might have her asthma is worse here than at like another state. And so when we're thinking about Utah and the spirit of family, we want our generations to continue here. And so that's one thing that I've heard tabling and events come up a lot is the dust and concern about that. So the Aral Sea, there was about 700,000 people who were forced to relocate due to the dust, and cancer rates have risen 50 to 60%. And Owens Lake is only 15th of the size of Great Salt Lake, and it's currently the largest source of carcinogenic dust. And so you can kind of wrap your head around a saline lake that's 15 times bigger than Owens Lake. The impact of dust would be much larger on our population since it's so close and it's way larger than the people living around Owens Lake. So I'm going to ask you guys to raise your hand if you know someone who's been affected by cancer. Yeah, so sadly, that's one of the great evils on this world is cancer. And I think we can all relate to how hard it is for families to go through that. And we obviously don't want anyone else to go through that as well. And so with all the hands that went up, you can see this is something that affects everyone really. And we don't want that to happen in the future. And I think everyone can agree on that. So when you're telling your story, I think it's important to think about what's happened in your own life and the implication of the future. So this is dust footage from Salt Lake City. Ben Abbott shared this morning as well. And so I won't disturb you guys again by showing it. And then these are some figures from Kevin Perry as well that we're briefly going to go over to explain why all of Utah should care about the dust.
Yeah, so I think, and this is, again, something that's been emphasized before, but I think is worthwhile talking about again, is that it's not a future issue that we're talking about. It's something that's happening right now. But the reason why we do talk about the future is because things will continue to get worse unless we're able to do something to make it better. And so this is a figure from a report that came out recently that shows how far dust from Great Salt Lake will travel over the course of several different hours. And so it's most of northern Utah. And so I would imagine, I know that there's a few people who came from out of state or maybe from the southern part of the state, but this probably means that most of us in this room live in one of these little rings, whether it's in the 1 hour, the 2 hour, the 3 hour mark. That means we're living in somewhere that's going to be affected by lake dust. And for reasons that I don't think we need to hit on anymore, that's not something that we want. I personally, we already have such bad air pollution. Why would we want that to get worse? So it just shows the importance of increasing our monitoring, increasing our awareness, and then also helping everyone else around us know that this is an everyone issue. And this is part of our own personal story, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about soon, is making sure that it's personal. And this dust is personal because it impacts us, impacts our family, our friends, strangers, enemies, everyone. And so recognizing the far-reaching impacts is such a crucial part of it.
Yeah, so I'm going to invite us all to take a breath together. We'll close our eyes and give ourselves a minute to feel the feelings that hearing about the dust and anything you've learned today has evoked for you. It might be sorrow, it might be anger, or it might be hope. And I hope that you can recognize both sides of that coin. So let's all close our eyes. You can still listen to the chatter of passionate people outside, but really focus on your own breath and try to calm down. So after taking a breath and thinking about it, I want you to keep that in mind as like what you want to focus your story on and what values you want to bring into your story. So why storytelling and why this presentation? So this talk was inspired by Darren Perry and Sav Peterson. So Darren Perry, he let us know that storytelling has been the Native Americans' way of sharing values in their community for thousands of years. And if we can go along with that spirit of telling stories to connect each other, I think that's a good thing. Sav Peterson, she works with Making Waves Artist Collab, and she helped develop this presentation, so we wanted to give a recognition for that. But yeah, so facts alone rarely move people. I think this conference is all very scientific, and everyone here really cares about the science of the watershed, but I think it's important to recognize that everyday people, when you're asking them to care about the Great Salt Lake, you have to make it personal for them and help them recognize like what the stake is for them. And research shows that narratives increase empathy and action taking. So you're more likely to take action if you have a personal connection to the Great Salt Lake or another issue that you may be passionate about. So Nathan's gonna tell you a bit about why storytelling is effective and why we should consider it as a tool to affect change.
So this is something that I personally get really excited about, is how we can use narratives and our voices to enact change, to get people excited and invested and aware of what's going on. So this is in the climate change sphere in discussion, and so a little bit different than maybe some of the water issues we face today, but still definitely connected. But there's a climate scientist named Katherine Hayhoe, and she's been a lead author on several IPCC reports. She's the lead climate scientist and just general scientist for the Nature Conservancy, and has had a really big impact in guiding the narrative around how we talk about climate change. And one of her biggest things is fairly simple. It's just actually talk about it. Talk about it with our neighbors, our friends, our families, people who we might think don't have the same views, no matter what your views are, right? If we have conversations about topics which might be difficult. It breaks them down, it makes it personal, and can have a lot of really positive impacts from it. So one example that I wanted to share is from a few years ago. There's a group of BYU students, whether you like or dislike BYU, but Catherine Heho was going to go and give a forum speech at the school. And there's a group of students and professors who got together and said, hey, we really want to take this invitation to talk about climate change and just the climate in general to heart. And so they set a goal to have conversations with 100,000 people. And mind you, there's only about 30 to 35,000 students at the school. So they wanted it to have not just a university impact, but a statewide or even international impact. And so they tracked it through some GIS technology. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but they got to at least 75,000 conversations over the course of about 3 months. And it was super cool. I actually was able to be a part of that. And it was really uplifting and inspiring to be part of something that felt really big. And right after, it didn't really feel like much had happened. And this next part, I can't say there's causation, but I definitely believe there's correlation. And this is something that Ben Abbott mentioned earlier today. But BYU being associated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, obviously there's probably some conversations going in between those two groups. And just last week, a newly called leader of that church gave a presentation to a group of faculty and students and specifically talked about that church's commitment to water conservation generally, and specifically the Great Salt Lake. And I think that having these conversations about environmental issues had a very direct impact on that even being a possibility just a few years later. So that's something kind of cool. But when we're talking about telling our stories, there's a few best practices based on some kind of psychological, sociological research that's found that first, dwelling entirely on negative topics and the negative aspects of these topics causes people to disengage and retreat from these really big and scary topics, which, I mean, makes sense, right? We get defensive, we want to curl back and not have anything to do with it because that feels safer to us. Even though just the opposite is actually real. When we disengage, less is done, and we're actually in more danger in the future. And so because of that, making sure that we include hope for improvement and positive changes in these narratives that we're sharing is absolutely critical. And really, I think what makes a big difference. There's other studies that have found that having specific actions for people to take after we tell them about these big things is way more likely to actually convince them to care and do something about it, rather than being vague and just say, oh, we've got this big problem. Oh, well, because that's not true. There's a lot that we can do about these issues. So this next little part, so a little bit of my background. Right now, I'm doing a master's in environmental sociology at Utah State. And part of my research is studying this concept called psychological distance, which is kind of a niche thing, but basically it means it's the perceived distance, whether that's spatial, temporal, social, or hypothetical, from something. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that our perceived distance impacts and has a relationship with personal engagement. So if we perceive, say, the drying of Great Salt Lake as a distant issue in any of these 4 different ways, then we're less likely to engage with it, we're less likely to care, and there's just a distance. It's more abstract. The closer it becomes to us, the more concrete it feels, and the more we feel like we can actually have an efficacious action towards that, and the more we care about it. So the way that we bridge this distance is 1, just general education, but 2, specifically personal connection. And that happens through stories, right? If I just came to Utah and I'm like, oh, there's this big lake, it's drying up, it's kind of stinky. Maybe it's not the most pretty lake. I don't really care about it. But then when I hear about my neighbors, how their ancestors came and it was this beacon of hope, right? It's this big inland sea in the middle of an arid place. And that's kind of cool. And you become able to build this connection. Then when you actually visit the lake, you're like, wow, this is really beautiful. And it becomes more real and more personal. And then we're able to actually take steps to engage on it in a more concrete and real area.
So now we're going to go into how to actually tell these stories. So anyone here today, you don't have to be an expert on the Great Salt Lake to tell your personal narrative. It can be completely unrelated to the Great Salt Lake and still connect back to a value you have. But we want to have a certain structure when we're telling our stories. So we want to start out with your personal narrative. Explain why you personally care about the issue. It might be, I've been to Spiral Jetty and I think it's pretty when there's more water there. It might be, my cousin is having a kid and I'm worried about her kid's health. It could be, I'm a birder and I want a bird. So it can be anything really, or it could be a moment from your childhood that you want to share. So start with why you care personally, because that helps make that personal connection to the person you're talking to and kind of puts in perspective for them as something human and not abstract for them. So after telling our story, we want to talk about the story of us. So what are we called to do? If you're a part of a community already, like a yoga group or a university research team, then you want to recognize your role in the movement. So if you're a scientist, it's educating the public about the Great Salt Lake. And when you're telling your story, you want to say you care about this issue because you work on it personally, and I think it can be any reason. So at the end of our story, we want to connect it to the story of now. So when you're talking about the Great Salt Lake is the example I'll use, I think we recently learned that Governor Cox announced by 2034 we wanted to restore the Great Salt Lake to a healthy level. So if you're telling someone that, they might not want to miss out on the opportunity to be a part of this movement and a part of the community that helped save Great Salt Lake. I think it'd be a really cool example to show the world. So we're going to start out with thinking about what our why is. I'll invite us for a couple minutes to think about an experience you had on the Great Salt Lake, or research that you've done that shed light on the Great Salt Lake, or something you learned here today. Think about what has motivated you to care about this issue. For me personally, I have a degree in biology, and so I really care about the ecology and the cycle of brine shrimp and brine flies that keeps us going, and thinking about just the beauty of the Great Salt Lake. That's something I care about. So now that you've thought about it, I'm going to invite us to group around our tables maybe, or your neighbor, and share an experience or even tell your story about what brought you here today and why you care about our watershed. Okay, let's bring it back together. I hope you guys learned something interesting about your neighbor and connected personally with them. So when you are telling your story, I think using your own why is probably the most key thing, is what you want to focus on when you're telling this story. So you can tell this story at Thanksgiving maybe and stir up some spicy conversations, or you can tell it to your mom in the car on the way to school. So I'm really glad that we're all here today and can go. I really hope that after this presentation, you go home and think about, how can I talk to the people around me about the Great Salt Lake and the issues I'm passionate about. It doesn't have to be Great Salt Lake. It could be any social issue or environmental issue that you care about. But we really want you to know that it's everyone that can connect with another person. I mean, when's the last time you introduced yourself to your neighbor? And so I'm not asking you to go to your neighbor's house and tell them why you care about Great Salt Lake, but I think starting somewhere and then trying to focus more on the people aspect of this environmental movement.
Okay, so as we've kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, this, the desiccation and drying of Great Salt Lake, and also just water scarcity and the drought that we're in, it's not an individual issue, right? I can't go, I live in an apartment, so I can't even change my grass because I don't own any grass. But if I did, I couldn't go and tear up my grass and put a bunch of gravel and say, great, this is going to be saved. And even if every single person in this room did that, these problems still wouldn't go away. It takes a much larger effort to actually make a difference. But the good thing is that as we do come together as Utahns, as people living in the Western United States, even throughout the world, and recognize that this is an us problem and the story is all about us, then that's how we can come together and really start developing solutions and making meaningful progress. And so some of the things that are important to consider as we're developing this collective story about how are we embedded in this issue are, first, what are our shared goals, purpose, and vision for our watershed? What do we want to come out of this? As part of some of the research I've done, we've done some interviews with people, and one of the questions we ask at the end is, to you, what does success look like? What would you tell your kids, your friends, your grandkids, 20 years from now, 50 years from now, and say, this is what success looks like for X, Y, or Z? In this case, maybe the Great Salt Lake. So that's, I think, something really important to think about is, what does success look like, and what does it take for us collectively to get there? And then the second question that's important to consider is, what values do we share with the broader community? Thinking about, do we want accessibility? Do we want justice? Do we want opportunity? And different things like that. Do we want houses? That's kind of a nice thing. And maybe that's not a value, but what are these things that are most important to us and that we don't want to sacrifice in this effort to get where we want to? And then finally, how are we mobilizing for our community? Each community has different needs and different resources that they can offer. And so thinking about, how does my community, and obviously that's a pretty flexible word, whether that's your family, your school, your workplace, your neighborhood, etc. What are things that are motivating and allow us to move and act? Are just important things to consider as we're talking about this. And then finally, what we say when we mean the story of now is the fact that this is happening right now. This isn't a future thing, as we mentioned at the beginning. But this is something that's happening right now, and we don't want people to miss out, right? We don't want to be the people who 30 years from now said, man, why didn't I get involved in making a difference in saving the lake, in water conservation, in protecting natural space, in affordable housing, and whatever these different things that are important to us? We don't want to have those regrets. And so considering that right now is when we need to be acting and engaged and involved. So just thinking about, what are these hopeful actions that we can take and that we're able to invite people to take is kind of how we conclude any sort of effective story and narrative. So is anything before we close for questions?
Yeah, so this picture is from Muda Oga. Many of you might have actually planted some of the trees that are there today. But I think this is one of the prime examples of what we're called to do now. We're calling our neighbors and friends and family to come plant trees or to come lobby during the legislative session, because it's a lot less scary when you're doing it together. And so that's something we want to focus, is more collaboration between people personally. And so I hope that when you leave this conference today, you keep that in mind. And so we'd love to see you in the community, and we're excited to get to know all of you more. Wanted to invite you to visit our table afterwards as you leave, to talk to me and Nathan a bit more, to meet some of our volunteers. But yeah, it's been a great conference, and we're looking forward to next year. Thanks, everyone. And for your Q&A, if you want to share your personal story real quick, then I would love that.
Okay, I'll go. I am wildly uncomfortable with speaking in public. I am the quintessential introvert, so let's get outside our comfort zone as we were asked to do yesterday in our keynote. My story comes from when I bought my first house. It was a white plank sided house, and I had just repainted that house, and I had never thought about dust coming off the Great Salt Lake. And we had a dust storm, one of the biggest storms that we've had in Salt Lake right after I bought the house. And that stark white color that I had just painted the siding was just a tarnished gray after that dust storm. And it made me think, where is this coming from? And I started investigating, and it turns out it came from the Great Salt Lake. And I never knew that the Great Salt Lake bed was that mobile. So that's what started my journey into the field that I'm now in. I've been in for 17 years.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think there's some homeowners in the audience here today, if you have the privilege. If you have lawn, I'd encourage you to flip your strip and visit Slow the Flow and learn how you can do that. But yeah, I think that's one thing I've noticed as well. I have some friends and family in Mill Creek, and they say there's lots of dust that have kind of traveled up into the mountains and valley. And that's one of their struggles as well that they weren't expecting.
So as with Bob's fear of public speaking, my fear is silence in large spaces with lots of people. So I just wanted to share a little tidbit that I picked up that ties beautifully in with your presentation is people do not care unless they know you care. And so, they don't care about what you're saying until they know that you care about what you're saying. My personal experience with the Great Salt Lake, I was sharing with Katie, Garth, we both have had the opportunity to take airboat rides out onto the Great Salt Lake, and it was the most incredible experience, or one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had in my life. We were probably a mile or two away from shore, and we were on water, but the water was all of 2 or 3 inches deep, and it was all flowing. The whole lake was moving, south towards the main body of Great Salt Lake. But it was just so bizarre that thought, this is a magical place. There are things happening here that don't happen anywhere else in the world. And so I think that's why part of the reason we need to save the lake. So thank you.
Yeah, Utah's a special place. Yes, Ren over here.
So I'm originally from Idaho, but I lived in Salt Lake for 6 years before I ever went out to Great Salt Lake. I kind of heard the narrative of, stinky, gross, not really like a place for people. And I spent my COVID stimulus check on camping gear and started camping by myself and found myself at Antelope Island blown away that it was almost a completely different place of what my experience of Utah had been. And shortly thereafter, hearing about the critical state and about the toxicity of the dust, that really motivated me to get involved because I love the people, plants, and animals here, and I hope to see them continue to thrive.
Yeah, I encourage everyone here to visit the Great Salt Lake on a weekly basis. I'm just kidding. But if you haven't been out there in a while, go connect with her. Yeah.
Hi, my name's Ava. I'm a student with UVU, and I also work with the Stormwater Consult, but a lot of where my stuff came from was my parents. They've done a whole bunch of stuff to kind of greenscape and Z-scape their area or their land. And I wanted to come out here and let you know that it is legal, and obviously talk with your lawyer and stuff, but it is legal to rainwater harvest in Utah. I've had a lot of questions about that, but you can have up to, I think it's 200 barrels of harvesting that are unregistered and up to of gallons, and then up to 2,500 or something gallons roughly. So anyway, that is an awesome thing that you can do as well to, irrigate, water your crops, even see if you can't replace some of your black water, gray water. So a little plug for rainwater harvesting and green infrastructure. Woo!
Yes, love to hear it. Yeah, I believe if you check in with your city, they have like free pickup days if you don't want to buy your own rain barrel. And so they'll give you one for free, I believe. Yeah.
Hi, how's it going? My name's Ethan. I've lived here in the Valley my whole life. And I've just noticed the lake shrink as I go to my grandparents up in Centerville, and it's like, oh, it's smaller. And so that's kind of my experience. I guess I imagine you guys also have like the billboards. Is that you guys that slow the flow? And
Yes, we have a billboard that
Grow the Flow.
displays the live lake level of percent full.
I guess my question to you is, what kind of reaction have you guys gotten, negative, if any? Kind of, is this fear mongering or anything like that, or have they been mostly positive?
Yeah, so I believe our billboard might be changing. Our goal was to just raise awareness about the fact that the lake is drying. We put it on the I-15 where people from out of state come to, but overall it's been really positive. We've had people mention it at events and tabling, and the comment they make is, I'm excited people are starting to really talk about it. And it's not just Grow the Flow, it's a whole swell of support that we're seeing. And right now is like the moment. And so overall, it's been really hopeful and exciting.
Awesome. Good to hear. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Sophia, and I want to say that I was born and raised in Utah, and I grew up in Layton, and so I would see Antelope Island and the Great Salt Lake every day going down to my elementary school, and I've seen it dry up in my lifetime, and so I think that that's kind of what gave me the passion to pursue my career in water resources. And so, yeah, that's why I'm passionate about the Great Salt Lake.
Thank you. That's great. Does anyone else want to share a special story or maybe experience they had on the Great Salt Lake, or value that they want us to take home with? If not, that's okay. We've all had a long 2 days. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming today. Again, please visit our table. Oh, sorry. One more.
Just a quick note about Grow the Flow. I'm sorry I did miss some of your presentation, but my name's Maria Monker. I'm PR and Communication for the Northwestern Shoshone. And just wanted to tell the Grow the Flow team thank you. They came out and brought a shuttle to our service event a couple of weeks ago to plant native plants at the Bear River Massacre site. And it's an amazing organization. So if you ever have time, I just want to put a plug in for their organization to get out and plant and grow the flow. So
thanks, Mariah. It's an honor, everyone.
Okay, big thanks to Grow the Flow.